Thank you so much. So my presentation, and already a lot has been said on several of the issues. So I will focus mostly on the first two parts, virtualism, cyberviolence, hate speech, and then of course a little bit on the impact of Metaverse, because that's the topic of this conference. But I really want to add to what already has been said and not to repeat too much. You will also see, like in my visuals, and I think in particular Lars will probably see that in my visuals, I'm a little bit more future-oriented than the current Metaverse, but my sense of aesthetics has taken over in my PowerPoint over reality. But then we need to be future-looking, so that is what I'm going to do. So as David already introduced, I'm a public prosecutor. I work on cybercrime. And within the anti-prosecutorial department, I'm also responsible for online sexual abuse. And that's something probably that was newly introduced because we believe that's really a field of law and prosecution where we need to focus on in the future, as we also see a lot of complaints in this field. With victims always getting younger and younger, and the harms are real. So I will definitely talk about that. On the other hand, I'm also an academic. I run several research projects in this field together with sexologists, criminologists, sociologists. So I will definitely be including that part of research, and then hopefully combine practice and research to give you some further info. So what is the actual issue here? And this is a report you can easily find of the Center for Countering Digital Hate, where they did a recording, 100 recordings in the Metaverse, the Horizon world, where they did 100 recordings, so basically general recordings, where they noticed that they actually found a lot of minors. And within those 100 recordings had 19 incidents of direct abuse against minors by adults. So that's not even 19 incidents of abuse, it's 19 incidents against minors, where there's the focus, which was sexually explicit insults, racial, misogynic harassment, and also, as you will see, there's also sexual imagery abuse. So that is just the random, the random happening of a recording that you will find in the study. In the meantime, you will find several studies that, basically give you the same outlaw, or the same scope on the Metaverse, where you will see that the vast majority, because it's 19 out of 100, so the vast majority is just good fun, but you will see also quite some abuse. And the fact that there are minors in this Metaverse also present, of course, make that this should be of our concern. So my focus will be on cyberviolence. You will see here the definition of cyberviolence from the Council of Europe. It's a part within what we call the General Department of Cybercrime. We distinguish between the more economic, financial cybercrimes, such as the phishings, the whalings, the CEO frauds, the hackings, the ransomwares, etc. And on the other hand, cyberviolence, where it's much more focused, the use of these digital devices focused on violence against individuals, and where they experience physical, sexual, psychological, or even economic harm or suffering. So it's really targeted not so much on getting an economic gain, but really to target a person. And an economic gain might come along. Think of sextortion, where the harm for the victim is really in their psychological, sexual integrity, but of course there's also a financial harm. So from the perpetrator's perspective, this might be an economic financial crime, but from the victim's perspective, this definitely results in what we call then cyberviolence. So if we look at the Metaverse, what are those kind of cyberviolence we are seeing at this moment? Hate speech has been one that has been mentioned already, but in addition to hate speech, because hate speech covers, there's also not one definition on hate speech. It covers a lot of grounds. We interviewed youngsters, and for example, youngsters, when you talk about hate speech, they start most of the time talking about body shaming, which as a lawyer, as a legal perspective, you wouldn't, include that under hate speech, because you would be thinking of those specific grounds that is in our legislation that would be unlawful speech. But what we see much more, and there's a real harm, it's not a general hate speech in the sense that you would say harmful comments on a group on the basis, for example, of skin color. What we see is much more harmful, and you see online, you see that as well in the metaverse, is very targeted hateful speech, which links cyberbullying, cyber harassment, and hate speech, where someone is targeted, insulted directly, either in direct contacts, either by always including someone in their speech on their personal traits such as skin color or religion, etc. So it's very targeted, and it links. I would say it's a new category within hate speech that links harassment, cyberbullying, and hate speech. So in addition, what have we seen as well? Child sexual abuse material, both being shared, both being distributed, both being asked for, whether we can get that somewhere. Also, there have been talk on dark web on developing algorithms to introduce child sexual abuse material on the metaverse or on other, not just the meta group, but other games as well. And we see that in particular in gaming. So in gaming, we've seen a lot of sharing of CISA material. We also see and that's more the phishing part. It's not the economic phishing I was hinting at, but we see that also these games and worlds and verses and all that is being used to look for contacts and to gain trust, and then go outside of this world to get nude images or to meet, or so to really get their trust, to then translate that to the physical world. So that is something that we're seeing as well, because of course in these kind of worlds you can enter being a minor while actually you're an adult. We see cyber flashing, the dick pics. That's the for those who are a little bit aware, the aubergine. And then also we see a lot of harassment, also getting doxing, so using personal data to out someone in these worlds. So those are all the harms we are seeing as to cyber violence. So let's turn to victimization. Yes, certain people are more victimized than others. So there is a difference if we look at these kind of cyber violence harms. And we have witnessed that already in other crimes, such as the share, many people call revenge porn. We call it non-consensual dissemination of intimate images. Or hate speech, you already saw these traits that will probably get you more victimized than another. So what are the criteria where we see there's more victimization? Women are more targeted than men. So we see that there's, throughout all the studies, including the studies my research team has run, that women are more targeted than men with cyber violence. That secondly, your sexuality will also play a role. So people from LGBTQI plus communities do also report higher victimization. Age is an issue as well. So age is a criterion. We see higher victimization with younger people. Then we also see higher victimization with people from other or the non-majority ethnical or cultural origin. So there we see also higher victimization. Interesting research also from India and Australia that shows that indigenous people might also be more targeted by cyber violence. And then the last one is the time you spend in these worlds or on social media or simply are being online. And you would think that's, of course, logic consequence. If you spend more time somewhere, then probably you would get more victimized. But we see actually that's not proportionate. You get disproportionately more victimized if you are young and spend a lot of time online. And the reason probably being that because they are much more online, that probably says something about parental control and alternatives and potential vulnerability. And that's why probably they will be more easily victimized. And also that they then will probably discover more of the, in this case, the metaverse, but probably of the digital world, and also come in other places where you need some, some skills, some time, some patience to get there. And we also see then, and that's then the consequence, if you look at the consequences, we see that there's an almost direct line as to youngsters who spend a lot of time online with psychological problems. So those youngsters that spend a vast amount of time online will report, throughout all the studies that are out there, higher levels of psychological harm and vulnerability. So that gives you already an idea of why we would want to, you know, invest in safety and prevention and a new culture. This is one of the quotes of just one of those cases of someone who has been in the metaverse being abused and attacked, where she said, well, it was very, she really felt that it was very intense, that she really had a lot of impact. And we had that discussion already of, you know, still rape is, I mean, still rape has a higher victimization probably than your avatar being abused. And that's still also because we look at this metaverse, and it has been mentioned several times, still quite cartoonish, it's geekish. If I would ask in the room, how many of you are on the metaverse and working with your avatar, this will be a very low percentage of you, I'm quite sure. I also think that a lot of you are thinking like, why in heaven's name, if you're here, why would you spend so much time on the metaverse? Just stay away from that. But go to the example we see in the movie, we've seen that, you know, that where it becomes a realistic world. And one of the topics we are working on is deep nude. So where you can make 100% actual nude image of someone just by having a picture of someone's face, you can make a very realistic image of someone who's completely nude. And there will be algorithms, they are being written today already, where someone will be, where you will be able to make a deep nude of someone and introduce that in these kind of virtual worlds. That's not future, that's today. There are applications where you can, you know, just run over a person live and make them nude. So just imagine you're an 18-year-old girl, you're an adult, and someone makes of you this kind of extremely realistic, believable, deep nude, introduces this in this kind of world, let you run through that world naked and being groped and raped. What do you think that the psychological impact will be on this person? You know, that's a whole different story than just this kind of cartoonish avatar, but that will be the future. And if in that case you would say this person has suffered the same psychological consequences as someone being actually raped, I think you would find that very believable. And at this moment, we are seeing that, for example, with revenge porn. So we have a lot of research done on victims of revenge porn, where their images were shared all over the internet. And they report the exact same psychological problems than people from sexual assault and rape. Even more often, they find it much more difficult to overcome because these images keep on hunting them. Because it's in the digital memory, it will stay there. And that's the same thing if you stick things into the blockchain and it's completely decentralized, it will be very difficult to actually do anything about that. And it will be all over the world. There's no escaping that. So that's the harm, and that's what we're looking at the future. So if you want to do something about it, we need to regulate now. That's the victim. Let's look at the perpetrator, and that's this connection. So we have quite some research on perpetrators, in particular on this kind of sexual cyberviolence. Why do they do that? Why are they, harassing women in that metaverse? Why are they groping women? Why do they find it so funny to, rape someone's avatar? And where the victim feels, abused, attacked, etc. If we go to the perpetrators, and it was mentioned already of, killing everyone in a game, and that's how they look at it. They say like, what are you talking about? Why are you talking to me? I mean, this was just fun. It's just a game. I mean, why is this woman complaining? Because I did that either for my own sexual desire, or I did that for for fun of it, or the game of it, or it was with a lot of guys together. We were playing, and we just thought it was funny. And so there's a complete disconnection between what it does to a victim, because the victim feels it in the real world. So that's the disconnection. The victim has real-world consequences, while the perpetrator disconnects the real world from the digital world and says that's something else, that's not real, right? And the problem for a victim as well is that the general majority of population will, of course, also make the disconnection and say, like, what are you complaining about? It's not real, you know, it's not real. But I hope that the example I've given you from Deep Nude might give you an idea of what that may mean, that this 18-year-old girl will not be able anymore psychologically to walk around in the real world with a feeling of safety, and that she has lost a part of her sexual integrity and privacy. So there's this disconnection, and I think if you look to the future, cultural societal change where we make that connection and a new culture of consent is essential. There is research on what does it do if you're constantly seeing this kind of, you know, rude speech and sexual assault and abuse and etc. What does it do with people? And I was mentioned there's no, I mean, it's not linear that because you see that online, you would be doing that in the physical world. However, research is quite coherent that it does have an impact on younger people, because they are forming their own, you know, sexual development approach. So what is normal? What is correct? And if they draw all of that, what is normal, from what peers are doing in a world without rules on consent or with rude language, they will think that is more normal, more appropriate, and will also be copying that in their first sexual encounters. So that might be a reason to do something about it. We talked about, you know, these future kind of cases, theft, or like theft, murder, rape, etc. But there are some things that are already criminalized on the level of the EU. First, of course, is criminalization of hate speech, where it has been accepted that this applies also to online speech. It is, it's hate speech. It's a particular form of hate speech. It needs to be public. Incitement of violence of hatred, so that's active. You really need to, it's a call to action, incitement, and against certain persons or group on the basis of specific grounds, race, color, religion, descent, or national or ethnic origin. So if you would be, calling on the metaverse to do this kind of, to incite, for example, violence against a certain group of people based on this race of color, then you would be, you would fall within the scope of this framework decision. Would it matter whether you would say that to a group of avatars? Not so much if it's a public forum, because it's about the public call of violence against a certain group, an existing group, that's for sure, an existing group, but on the base of race, color, religion, descent, or national ethnic origin. So if you would do a general call against all the blue Smurfs, and you would say, well, that's on the basis of color, no, of course, that's not the case. But if it's an actual group, if you would say, look, we should be done with all this people from migration, it's time we kill all the Moroccans in our city, you would do that on the metaverse, it's pretty clear this would come within the scope of the council framework. What is public? Well, it was not mentioned in the framework, but we do have the Digital Services Act that has been that has provided a more input of what public is, because of course the Digital Services Act focuses on this online platform, so we needed to know what is it. And it says, it's not, if you would limit it to a certain group, could that still be possible? Could that still be public? And the answer is positive. A potentially unlimited number of persons, potentially unlimited, but if you would limit it to a certain group, within this unlimited group, it's still public, right? So if you would have certain worlds within a metaverse, that would still qualify as public. We have also, in addition, I've given, and the framework decision is an example where you can also see that there can be criminalization. There are also other fields of cyber violence where you see this happening at the moment. We have a proposal of directive. This directive will fly, so this will pass. There's a lot of support for this directive. There are still some of the elements that will be discussed. It was introduced, the proposal, last year, and it focuses on gendered violence and domestic violence, and it includes particular online violence on a gendered basis. So it doesn't need to be against women, but on a gendered basis, including non-consensual sharing of intimate images. But you also see there manipulated material. So also produced images. It could be screenshots, but it also includes deep nudes. Deep nude producing will fall under that category: cyber stalking, cyber harassment, and cyber gendered then hate speech. If you also look at the scope, there's no reason why it wouldn't apply to immersive worlds and virtual reality, in the sense, of course, that at that moment it would actually have this physical or emotional, psychological, and sexual integrity impact on a victim, right? And then finally, we have the CSAM directive, where you also see the offense of CSAM, where a realistic portrayal of a child within a CSAM perspective might also fall within that ambit. And you see that many of the national criminal provisions also include, you know, the realistic portrayal of children in a sexualized environment. So you see there is already quite a lot that could be applied in the sense of cyber violence, and that is also rethinking about digital approaches. That brings us, of course, to the fact that, okay, we have this legislation, but investigating and prosecuting is very difficult, because what you would be doing in the metaverse is not just content. So that's what we're focusing on now on social media. We focus on content. You go to these platforms and you see there's the video of this person, there's a picture of this person, there's this post of a person, and we focus on that. However, in the metaverse, it will be much more about behavior. So you would also need to check on behavior. We do have quite some experience in the gaming world. It takes a different approach. And what might be problematic in national legislation, you often see that the intent of the perpetrator is also taken into account for criminalization. Did they do it, for example, you see that with a lot of provisions on non-consensual intimate images. You see that they have shared it with the intent to harm. And it's quite difficult to prove, definitely in this kind of gaming situation where we already know perpetrators say, no, I did it for fun. And then you would be able to escape criminalization. And I think that is something legislator needs to take into account. So that's one. Second, national criminal provisions are not often up to date with the digital world. And that makes it difficult when we cooperate, because it will be transborder when we cooperate with other states. Then identification of perpetrators is difficult. It's different with, at this moment, social media, websites, etc., because there we look at URLs. And we always want to get to those IP addresses to really get to an identification of a person. But here we have an additional step with identifying avatars, then from the avatars to the accounts. Now we can still do that quite easily because Meta still has, you know, decentralized control. But if we go to completely decentralized control, it will be very difficult to get there. We already mentioned localize. For me, it's not so much a crime that's difficult to localize. This is how it happens. A victim comes to the police, and that's where we take it on. And if we then find the perpetrator who's somewhere else, then we can you know, discuss localization. What the problem is for us is that the evidence will be in other parts of the world. And to get to that evidence is difficult. Either it's within the European Union and we do it via European investigation order, but all prosecutors who are in the room will know this is slow. It's not fast, it is slow. And we don't even have to think about, you know, when we have to work with MLATs, or when we work with then countries where we don't have bilateral or multilateral agreements. And And that is a problem, because you can say, like, you know, this is all blockchain, this is all transparent. But everyone who's ever went after cryptocurrency, I don't know whether a lot of the people in the room have this, you know, experience with trying to get to, you know, identification of people who money laundered with crypto. You know, the moment you have information of an exchange, those Bitcoins or Ethereums are already, you know, so much further away, and you have the feeling you're constantly trailing and running behind the crypto, because we need to work as prosecution every time with orders being translated, being sent in our official languages, coming back, and then we can move further. So those are definitely problems when we work there. So what are then potential elements for success? I already mentioned avatar and account details. The e-evidence regulation has been discussed before, can help us. I don't have so much hope in this avenue, the avatar account details, in particular because you see the platforms are ever more making it decentralized in a manner that you can use a lot of anonymity. Classic criminal investigations, observations, infiltrations will still get us a long way. The most successful at this moment is follow the money. I think the follow the money approach is probably the most successful to go to an identification of a person. If you have child sexual abuse cases, I always think, okay, we need to go to the IPs, etc., etc. But I'm actually seeing that in child sexual abuse TL cases, we often get to identification via follow the money approach and actually going behind the money. It might even be on platforms where we look at the advertisers. At some point, there was someone advertising somewhere. He needed to have paid for that. Or there's a platform. It was hosted on a register, and this register is legit. So let's see who paid, how, when, and follow the money trail to get to someone and hope they make a mistake. And then there are actually on the market AI applications for behavioral conduct. You need legislation to apply that. I have heard about it. I've never seen it, but apparently there are also scripts that certain jurisdictions can run on these immersive platforms. These are these things you read in Wired, etc. I don't know whether it's real, whether it's not real, but probably that's also the approach to be doing. Something that I find very important as a prosecutor and very useful is open source intelligence. Because what you see is often that what people do in this Horizon world or gaming worlds, they often use avatars and names and traits they also use on other social media. And often we do find a lot of, you know, identification details just by mapping the whole of the internet and everything that they can be doing to get an idea of this person, how they can be. So in combining real world information with digital information, and that might definitely be also, you know, an approach that can bring you to a potential suspect. But we need to think beyond crime and punishment. I don't think this is, you know, the metaverse that is, will this explode in prosecutional cases? No. In Belgium, we had one case in the last 15 years that was, I would say, quite metaverse-ish, which was in Second Life. We see a lot of cases in gaming, social media. So the second generation, we see a lot of those cases. And that is exploding. But why do I not think it will be exploding? Because we already know from research that in general, people will not go to the police with these kind of cases. Because they think, and we know that from research from a colleague of the Netherlands, Rutger Leukveld, that they often think that police is, and law enforcement in general, is not up to date. So why would I go with a super high technological crime to police? Because they won't be able to solve that. So that is definitely a threshold for people. Also, I mentioned what the victimization is. Often they are vulnerable, they're young, they're minority. They might not also have such a good standing or such a good idea of law enforcement. So lowering that bar there as well will be important. And if you want to do justice to someone who does file a claim, we need to be up to date with technology. But what is an additional task that is being given ever more often to law enforcement and police. In Belgium is actually a legal obligation you have as prosecution, is also content removal. We have, as Belgian prosecutors, if there is revenge porn, if there is CSAM, we have an obligation also to remove the content online. So that brings us also this new task, and a moment that it will be very hard or almost impossible, because it's completely decentralized, locked in blockchains, or there's no cooperation. That will be a difficult task, and it might become an illusory task that we have. So I think content removal in the end for victims is something we should work on. Prevention and moderation. Meta says about the Metaverse, well, it's just a bar. We just provided a bar. You walk in, you don't like it, you walk out. I think that is not sufficient. You have written the algorithms and you've put that there out in the world. And then you already knew as Meta what the potential risks could be. So I think there need to be these standards. And they do have, you can report to their safety team. So there is a safety team, and I think algorithms, the coding, the writing, the application needs to be looked at, and there needs to liability as well for the general gaming sector, but also this kind of beyond gaming immersive worlds. Should it be criminal? Consumer law, a contract law, the new AI Act that will be coming out at the level of the European Union. I think there is really a lot of what we can do and where we should focus on. It shouldn't be all criminal. And then finally, and I think we always talk about the dangers, but there's of course much to be gained as well. We can learn, we can train on the Metaverse or in other gaming worlds. I think we can attract actually a lot of also young people to help to make this a better world by using this technology to actually learn, but also for perpetrators. There's a fantastic, and I will stop at that, a fantastic project in the Netherlands, research project on violence in prisons. So in detention facilities, you see there's often a lot of violence against inmates, between inmates, wars and inmates. And so there's this research where they use virtual reality to put someone back in the situation where they were and where there was violence, to learn how could we have prevented it? Why did this violence happen? And how can we make our detention facilities or prisons a safer environment, that there shouldn't be violence against inmates or against wards, and we can make this a better, a place where they come out better instead of worse. So I think these are all very useful experiences that we definitely can use as well for the better in law enforcement. Thank you very much.